Hi Saltwater Classroom. In this video, we're going to learn about ocean zones. To get started, make sure you have a printed out copy of your ocean zone template and a pencil. Here we go. Let's get started. Introduction. In order to begin to really understand life below the surface, it is important to understand that within the ocean, there are many different habitats. These habitats are defined by physical and chemical properties that exist at different depths and in different areas of the ocean. In this activity, we're going to identify and describe different zones of the ocean and think a little bit about the organisms that live there. One of the most important things to think about when discussing zones in the ocean is sunlight. Does anyone have any ideas about why sunlight would be important to consider? Well, for marine plants and phytoplankton, sunlight supports photosynthesis, and these organisms serve as the basis of the food web in the entire ocean. And they need sunlight to survive. In the ocean, sunlight can only reach to certain depths. So that's our first zone in the ocean. Well, two zones, where sunlight can reach and where sunlight cannot reach. We'll start with the photic and aphotic zones. First, the photic zone. Does photic sound like anything to you? Maybe photography or photosynthesis? Well, phot, the first part of this word here, is a prefix and it means light in Greek. So the photic zone is the area where light or sunlight is able to penetrate. As we said before, this is really important for organisms like phytoplankton or marine plants that need sunlight to photosynthesize. And they are food for everything, one way or the other. So, the photic zone extends only 200 meters in the ocean and is only 25% of the ocean, but supports 90% of marine life. So if you imagine a bathtub, right, as the ocean, the top quarter would be the photic zone, only 25%, but all of the life that's in the ocean would be within that top layer. So that's the photic zone. The aphotic zone is, you might have guessed it, where there is no sunlight. Organisms that live here have had to adapt to be able to live in low light conditions or no light. Photic and aphotic are pretty broad categories. So the distinctions, the ocean zones in the ocean based on light are broken up into additional categories too. There's lots of different names for these ones, but Saltwater Classroom likes to use these three zones. The first one is called the sunlight zone. This is where the top layer closest to the surface and where sunlight is really abundant, meaning there's lots of sunlight. This is where most of the marine life lives. Second is the twilight zone. The twilight zone is the area where only a small amount of sunlight can penetrate. Most marine plants cannot live in this zone, but organisms have adapted to living here. Third is the midnight zone. Any ideas about the light there? You guessed it, darkness. In the midnight zone, it's entirely dark, there's incredible pressure, and the water temperature is near freezing. The only life in this zone are found near hydrothermal vents, which are cracks in the ocean floor that release minerals from the center of the earth. So the sunlight zone, twilight zone, midnight zone. These are all further categories related to the sun, like photic and aphotic, but a little more specific. After sunlight, ocean zones are characterized by the type of habitat that it is. In the ocean, habitats are either pelagic or benthic. Pelagic just means open ocean. Pelagic environments, again, refer to the open ocean. Benthic environments, on the other hand, are environments that are related to the ocean floor. Benthic environments can be near shore, like the intertidal zone or shallow reefs or something like that, but they can also be on the very deepest part of the ocean in the midnight zone. benthic environments just relate to the floor itself, as opposed to pelagic, the open ocean. Pelagic environments are further categorized as either neritic or oceanic. Neritic, can everyone say that word? Neritic environments are pelagic environments that are close to the shore or close to the continent, close to the land. So you have neritic environments close to the shore and oceanic environments away from the shore. There's one zone that we've already learned a lot about and you have actually explored. This is the intertidal zone. The intertidal zone, as you guys know, is the area in between high and low tide. On our diagrams, it's right here. You can imagine the tide coming up and down on the land. The last thing we're going to label is the land. There are 4 things to label for the land. The first area on the land to label is the continental shelf. This is the area of land that's underwater still, that extends out beyond the continents themselves. The continental shelf ends when it hits the area called the continental slope. At this point is where you find drop-offs. Has anyone ever heard of a drop-off, maybe in Finding Nemo? That's where the continental shelf meets the continental slope and drops off into really deep, deep water. So you have the continental shelf, which is near land and the shallow part of the ocean that extends beyond the continents themselves. Then you need a drop-off where you get the continental slope. And then below the continental slope, when it starts to level out, you have the ocean floor, and this area is called the abyssal plain. Abyssal plain. The 4th area of the land to label is this here. Does anyone have any ideas about what this might be? This is an example of a trench. All throughout the ocean at different areas, there are trenches like this. Maybe you guys made a flag for the Pacific Ocean and learned about the Mariana Trench, which of course is the deepest part in the ocean. But in all the other oceans, there are trenches too. In the Antarctic, for instance, there's this trench called the South Sandwich Trench, which is the deepest point there. In the Atlantic Ocean, we have the Puerto Rico Trench.
Now that you guys have learned about the names of all of the different zones in the ocean, let's talk a little bit about who lives there and what we know about these zones. Did you know that humans have explored space more than we've explored the oceans? That's because all the way down here in the aphotic zone, there's really a lot of pressure from all of the water on top of it. It's really cold and dark, and hardly anything lives down there. From the exploration that we have done down in the deep, deep, deep dark of the ocean, we found relatively little. Now, does that mean that there isn't anything down there? No, it just means we haven't really had the technology to explore it enough. If you're interested in learning more about the creatures that live down in the deep, dark aphotic zone, check out the additional information by clicking on the plus button at the bottom of this lesson. Now that you guys have learned about all of the different ocean zones, you're one step closer to being a true oceanographer.